The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
I got some good advice from one of my mentors who said, don't ever leave a job until you have a job.
Mark Schult is entering his first season as an assistant men's basketball coach at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Schult spent the previous 2 seasons at Division II University of West Georgia, where he earned his Master's of Science in Sports Management. Schult spent the 2 years prior to West Georgia as an assistant coach for Clark State College in Springfield, Ohio. He played a large role in turning around the Eagles' culture as the program went from 1 win to 15 wins over his 2 seasons. During college, Schult served as a student assistant at Wittenberg University. He played 2 seasons for the Tigers prior to joining the coaching staff. Hey Hoopheads, I wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Sign up now for their Virtual Camp 2.0 featuring 10 days of workouts with pro trainers from the Dr. Dish family. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Coach Lionel Garrett from Wilberforce University, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering new subscribers 10% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code SAVE10 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its play bank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball.
Grab pen and paper so you're ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Mark Schult, men's basketball assistant coach at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, and we are pleased to welcome back to the Hoopheads Pod Mark Schult, who is currently an assistant coach at Division III Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Mark, welcome back to the Hoopheads Pod.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, thanks for having me. I know you and Jason have been killing it. I know through the COVID and everything, but it's good to be back.
We're excited to be able to have you back. And since you last spoke with us, you have been to 2 different positions. So when we last spoke with you, you were working at Clark State in Springfield, Ohio at the JUCO level. You were the youngest assistant college coach in the country at that time. And now you're a couple more years into your career. So what we thought we would do to kind of kick off this episode is just let you give a quick 1 or 2 minute synopsis of what we talked about the last time. So how you went from high school to college to coaching, and then we'll dive in into your transition from Clark State to West Georgia. And we're going to get into more detail about your 2 job searches and what you did at West Georgia and how things are looking at center. But I'm going to hand the microphone over to you proverbially here and let you talk about how you got to where you were at Clark State and just kind of give us a quick recap of the first podcast for people who maybe didn't listen to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in northern Kentucky, just outside Cincinnati. Played high school ball at Covington Catholic, just all the way on the north side there. And had a good run our senior year. Ended up winning state. From there, I went to Wittenberg University, Division III school in Ohio. Played for 2 seasons at Wittenberg. My 3rd season, ended up getting cut but slid really easily into a student manager, student coach role. From there, after my junior year, was kind of planning a year in advance, looking for GA jobs, and got really lucky that Clark State JUCO in Springfield, Ohio, was looking for an assistant. So they actually hired me while I was still a senior in college. So for that 6 months or so that I was 21 and coaching college was probably something that doesn't happen too often. But that was 2019, a little over 2 years ago now. And since then, I was fortunate to get a graduate assistant job at Division II, University of West Georgia, a little town called Carrollton, about an hour from Atlanta. And had 2 really, really fun seasons there, and just learned about as much as I could in 2 years. And then after graduating in May, through a bit of a whirlwind of a search, ended up getting an assistant coach job here at Center College. And it's been a lot of fun. It's different. It's a high academic Division III, but I'm learning and trying to dive right in and just be a sponge and absorb it all. So it's been a crazy path, but I'm very lucky to end up where I am.
Interesting already that you have been at 3 different levels as a college coach. So you start out at the JUCO level, you go to Division II, and now you're at the Division III level. So one of the things we definitely want to talk about is what are some of the differences at each of those levels. Let's go back to leaving Clark State and getting the opportunity at University of West Georgia. How does that come to pass? What makes the decision to go to University of West Georgia, get the GA job, continue your education while you're coaching? Just tell us a little bit about how you end up at University of West Georgia.
Right. So, it was just May of 2019. And obviously, as coaches know, that's a really busy time to, get out and recruit in the spring. And it's also busy for jobs. That's April, May, June, I guess some jobs are still being placed now. But typically, April through the summer months are just, there's a lot of movement. I was just really lucky, and when I was in college, I had coached for 2 summers in the AAU circuit with Mike Price, head coach at Oak Hills in Cincinnati. And I was on his staff after having played for him in high school for the Shining Stars. So I did that while I was in college. And one of his former players from the 90s, Dave Moore, is the head coach at the University of West Georgia. And his GA had just graduated, and he called Mike Price and said, "Hey, do you know anybody?" And fortunately, I got him his resume, did some phone interviews, and kind of took it from there.
Once you get there and you start acclimating yourself to a new university, a new town, a new level, what are some of the things you remember that were easy about that transition, and maybe what was 1 or 2 things that were more difficult about that transition from Clark State to University of West Georgia?
I think the easiest things were kind of what everybody sees, is the time spent with your players, getting to know your guys outside of basketball, just in terms of, connecting with them on what's going on in school and, what other teams on campus are doing. So I had a good idea of, how to kind of meet the team and introduce myself to them and get to know them a little bit. And then the challenging thing, and I say it was a challenge, but it was far and away the best part of my time at West Georgia, was just the raised level of intensity, the sense of urgency, and when you're dealing with scholarship players, at that level, it's really competitive. And, it all started with Coach Moore and just his work ethic, really setting the tone for everybody in the program. And, pretty much the mentality was, on my first day, he said, if you were at Duke or Kentucky or Kansas, like, that's how you got to treat this job. And, I was fortunate that he gave me that advice. I followed it to the best of my ability, but, getting involved with the school, getting involved in the community, were challenges that, obviously COVID didn't help, but, they were all things that, we were able to do. And, like I said, it was just a tremendous experience, full of learning, full of growth.
What were some of your responsibilities that you had to take care of there as part of the staff? Was there anything that was specifically given to you? Hey, Mark, you're in charge of X, or were you working more underneath some of the other assistant coaches? Just how was the staff structured in that way?
Right. So it was we had Dave Moore, the head coach, Andy Young, full-time assistant, and myself. So kind of by default, I got a little bit of everything. The standard GA stuff that you would expect, getting managers and training managers, and helping out with skill development workouts. If the other coaches are recruiting, actually running those skill development workouts. Or conversely, I'm going recruiting while everybody else is on campus. So I got to do a lot of those things. And then the other one, I guess, would be the social media. I was able to kind of take that over and really help grow the program and boost the brand and everything. And then from a basketball standpoint, with the staff that small, I was fortunate to get a lot of the wet, X's and O's part. So I had a third of the scouting reports over the 2 years. And, when it's your scouting report, again, Coach Moore gave me great advice. He said, you're the head coach of this scout. It's your voice. You're presenting it to the team. You're making the film. Do it how you want to. And now, obviously, sometimes he would look at what I wanted to do and change it. That's always going to happen. But so that was really good. And then I guess some more little stuff that you don't think about. The average fan wouldn't think about is organizing the travel, organizing the food, doing the laundry. On senior day, making sure the logistics are in place, different stuff like that. So with the size of the staff, I really touched everything. But getting to head the social media, getting to head the study hall, and the community service programs were probably the three, bigger ones that I had a foot in.
It's interesting when you think about what it means to be a basketball coach, and when you're young, so let's say you're a high school player who is thinking that someday they want to be a basketball coach, and hearing you talk right now and saying, I was in charge of community outreach, and I was in charge of social media, and I'm in charge of travel logistics, and I'm in charge of making sure that we got all the meals, and all things that are clearly critically important to a college basketball program, but also things that are not necessarily basketball coach related. And I think that's one of the things that always comes through in almost every interview we do is the number of things that coaches do that are more administrative in nature and less basketball coaching on the floor. And you mentioned coaching on the floor, that you did a lot of the player development workouts. What are some things that you learned about player development there at University of West Georgia in terms of how you went about designing what those workouts look like and meeting the needs of your individual players to help them get better so it would translate into games? What was your process for putting those workouts together to make sure you were maximizing your time with the players out on the floor when it came to player development?
Right. So everything I did, obviously, as I think any assistant does, you got to follow your head coach's lead, and Coach Moore had spent 11 seasons as an assistant at St. Bonaventure, which is, obviously a program with a tremendous turnaround under Mark Schult. And so everything we did, came from there for the most part. The number one thing with the skill development was just the pace and intensity. I really believe, if you're not going game speed, there's almost no value in it. Now there are things like warming up with ball handling. There's form shooting. There's exceptions. But once you're actually getting into the workout, I think everything needs to be as game-like as possible. And a big misconception that I think a lot of coaches or trainers might have is game speed is not always 100 miles per hour. You've got to have bursts, you got to have hesitations, you got to have change of direction. And, So we would kind of, basically look at our offense, look at the plays that our players were scoring in. Like the best off-season activity we ever did was as the unofficial video coordinator. I had to compile every field goal attempt from the whole season, put it into a clip, into one edit. And, so for some guys, that's a 45-minute video, 100, 200 shot attempts. For other guys, it's 10 minutes, it's 5 minutes. But, from doing that and getting a real good feel for the type of shots that your guys are getting, and then combining that with, how the offense is designed and the situations and the positions that they'll be in, try to tailor our skill development workouts from there. So a lot of wing ball screens, a lot of slot ball screens, a lot of drag screens up top. I mean, we ran a ball screen motion, so that was a big emphasis. But that and getting a healthy balance of shooting, getting your stroke to the point where you're just confident, where it's, your muscle memory is on. But I think definitely the pace was the number one takeaway in player development. And the second thing would be, really dialing in and focusing on what a game shot looks like for each individual player.
That makes a lot of sense. I think when you start talking about having players work on the things that they're actually going to do in a game, right? It doesn't do you any good for a player to make 79 dribble moves and then take a shot when we all know that that's not what they're going to do in a game. Maybe you have one player on your team who gets to put the ball on the floor and do those kinds of things. But for the most part, most guys aren't going to get the opportunity to do that. So putting them in positions to work on the things that they're actually going to do in games is really, really important. I know anytime you hear about players working at the college level and you think about that adjustment from one level to the next and just thinking about the intensity and the pace of a college practice versus a high school practice, or I'm sure there's even a difference from when you go to a Division I practice versus Division II practice versus Division III, not in terms of how hard the players are working, but in terms of the athleticism and just the things that a player physically is able to do. How do you guys balance out when you're doing a workout? How do you think about reps that a player is going to do by themselves versus putting a player in a group where maybe they're working one-on-one, maybe they're working 2-on-2, or they're working 3-on-3, where you can simulate more game conditions, but maybe you can't get as many reps as you can when you just have one player by themselves. So how do you balance out a player getting a lot of reps where they're shooting by themselves, let's say, versus a player maybe getting more opportunities to play in a game-like scenario? How do you balance that out in player development?
So we would do that kind of over a cycle of the whole preseason. We would kind of build up to closer to game simulation, if that makes sense. So the first, I think we have 8 weeks of preseason, Division II, 8 or 9, depends on the year, but pretty much the first, 3.5, 4 weeks will just be skill development groups of guys on their own, groups of 2, groups of 3. And those sessions were mostly, a lot of, like the only defense you would see is the coach on the pad, and finishing through contact or hedging screens. But it wasn't really, a live defender, and then after 3 or 4 weeks, we would combine the groups, and we'd switch the times around so that I could be working with the big guys on one end for about 20, 25 minutes. Coach Young or Coach Moore would be on the other end with the guards. And then after 25, 30 minutes, we'd come together and play 2-on-2, and try to take exactly what we did, and make it competitive and make it a game situation. And the other thing too, I might go to last question, but it applies here. I think it's good for coaches to add to their workouts, like every drill with one player or 2 players, like we would always try to put some sort of objective on there. So whether that be a timed shooting drill, right? You got to make 10 threes in 2 minutes. They got to be 2 in a row at each spot. or or some sort of competition, right? Or some sort of team activity where, it's a race on who can make the most shots first. So there was always an extra element of time or score to try to get that kind of that game-like pressure. And, not exactly a game situation in terms of defense, but like the mental aspect of it, of having a goal, having an objective. That's kind of how we progressed it. And I think it's good. I think it's really valuable, because the mental aspect is arguably as important or more important as the physical reps that you're getting as well.
Did that transfer over then once regular season practice started in terms of the competitiveness of drills and tracking it, whether it's through time or total number of makes or wins and losses? How did you guys go about at West Georgia putting together competitive practices? Were the things that you just talked about in player development things that you were also doing during the season to help you to instill and stoke that competitive fire in your players?
Right. So it's probably an obvious one, but pretty much in practice, as a lot of teams do, it's hard to fit development in, especially with a big group, especially with limited time. So we really encourage guys to get in on their own. And by year 2, they really started to buy in. And I think that's why we had some success. But from a team practice perspective, every drill had a winner and a loser. Whether we're doing rebounding, whether if we're going to do ball handling, we're going to add an element to, whether it's a race or whether it's alley ball into live, that there was always a winner or a loser. And the loser always had something, a punishment. I don't really like that word. I'd say consequence is better. And it wasn't always bad. Is 5 push-ups for a college athlete a punishment? I don't think so. Or 1 down back, not timed. So there was always an element, something to, keep that drive in the back of your head that, hey, we're playing for something here. We're playing for a quicker water break or, less, 5 less push-ups, whatever it is. But there would always be, something to, something external to kind of drive that competitive aspect of the practice.
What would you say is the most important thing that you learned at West Georgia that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your career?
It's easy. It's a quote from Coach Moore. Winning is in the details. I can't take full credit for it. It's his quote, but my goodness, like if every little thing, if you show attention to detail, your players will, or if you have a practice plan and it's shaky or you're unsure of something, right? Like that's going to translate to how the team performs. So we really emphasize the details, the little things. There's no typos on scouting reports. When there's videos made, like if the volume's supposed to be off, the volume's off. But it was just the details and the little things. And it translates to the game in that it's an off the ball, screen away from the play. 8 times out of 10, that pass might not even be there. But if you're setting a good screen every single time, and you get 1 bucket out of it, that can be the difference in a win or loss. So we just focused on, doing your job, controlling what you control, and doing all the little things right. And fortunately, that's what helped us to have a good run at the end of the second year.
How did Coach Moore instill that in you as a member of his staff and in his players? What did that look like on a day-to-day basis, focusing in on those details? Because I would have to think that you have to be very intentional in order to A, notice those things, and then B, to be able to get players and staff to be able to buy into those. And obviously he can't be everywhere. His eyes can't see everything. And yet we know that once that type of culture is established, it's established everywhere, even when the head coach isn't there. So what did you learn from him in terms of establishing that type of winning is in the details culture that he was able to put in place at West Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing was just the example he set. I think there's a saying that goes around, and I think it's true that, three people can't have a bad practice: your head coach, your point guard, your best player. And he held up his end of the deal. I mean, we could, we had conference tournament. We had to drive like 6 hours to Union, Tennessee, and then 6 hours back to Carrollton, sleep for a day, and then drive 5 hours to Valdosta and play. And like that practice on the travel day, everybody was dragging. I mean, everybody. I mean, the trainer, the managers, like we would beat, big conference game, 12 hours on the road in a day, or a day and a half. But Coach Moore was fired up for that practice. I mean, he was ready to go. He was energetic. He always jokes about it. He says he's going to sweat through every suit he has. And he did, when we were wearing suits. But he just always brought the energy, the intensity himself. And, he was a master communicator to the players and staff. And he was really good. He would never embarrass somebody, out of line or anything. But if you weren't bringing the effort, bringing the focus that you were supposed to, he would let you know about it. And, some people get really hurt by that or think that that's being mean, but, everybody knew that, he wouldn't be doing that unless he knew you could do better. So I think just by him holding himself accountable and bringing it every day, everybody kind of fed off that. And tangibly, we have team meetings and all that stuff. But the big thing was we talked about the skill development workouts. Pretty much after every team gathering, we would huddle up, and whether that was a workout with one guy, right, whether that was a workout with two or three, with the whole team in the weight room or conditioning or whatever it was, we would always gather, we would always regroup, always reflect on how the practice went. And try to build on it the next day. So it was just a constant, example from him, and then constant reminders at the end of every day or the end of every session that I think really, helped spread the message and get the buy-in that we got.
What did that reflection look like from a player standpoint? So let's say a workout ends. You got two or three guys that you just worked out. You guys have been going at it for an hour, working hard, and now you're going to sit back and you're going to reflect on how that went. Are you sharing your feelings as the coach? Are the players sharing their thoughts? Are they praising one another for good things that they saw during the workout? How did that process go in terms of that self-reflection, both for you as a staff member and for the players?
Yeah, it usually depended on, obviously how the workout went, but then who was there too, and everybody has different abilities, and I think it's important to keep that in mind when trying to evaluate a workout or evaluate, but it would just depend for some guys, if they had a bad day, we wouldn't even need to address it. We could just ask the players themselves, how did you do today? What do you think your weakness was today? That's really good. I think it gives players an opportunity to understand that they're involved, understand that they're being heard, and give them a chance to, it almost forces them to think, how did I do today? Why am I not in shape? Did I go to sleep early last night? Did I eat this morning? All that stuff. And then, sometimes after a really good workout, it would be the same thing. It's like, now can you do that again tomorrow? Is this going to be a one-time fluke thing? If you want to be a pro, like you say you do, like this has to be it every day. So I think, equal praise and equal criticism, where appropriate was kind of how we did that.
Are you tired of slipping and sliding on the court and sticky sheets just aren't giving you grip? Grip Spritz solves this problem without having to lick your hand to clean your shoes. Grip Spritz is used by countless AAU, high school and college programs, semi-pro teams, as well as NCAA athletes and G League players. Unlike other products, Grip Spritz has solutions for individual players, not just entire teams. We've used Grip Spritz at our Head Start basketball camps and players love it. To keep you and your team from slipping and sliding, visit gripspritz.net to learn more. It's interesting because I think one of the challenges as coaches is to be able to get your players to have that level of self-reflection and be able to speak out loud about their own game, right? We don't always like to I think we're maybe self-critical inside of our own head, but we don't necessarily like to share those insecurities as a player or even as a coach of, hey, I'm thinking that this is a mistake that I made, or here's something that I could do better. And we don't often like to admit those weaknesses. And I think when you can get players to be vulnerable and to share when things maybe don't go as well as they'd like, then it gets them to start to recognize that. And then they can start to figure out ways, as you said, to fix it so that when they do have a good day, you can say, okay, this is more like what it needs to be all the time if you want to reach your individual goals and we want to reach our goals as a team. And that type of communication, I think, is only built through trust and building that relationship day by day by day. And it goes back to that winning is in the small details, right? Building those relationships allows you to get more out of your players because ultimately they trust you. And I think that's really, really important. As your time at University of West Georgia and that GA position is coming to an end, let's jump into your job search, which I know you and I talked during the process, and there was definitely some frustrating moments for you in there as you were looking around for jobs. Talk to me a little bit about how you started the process, and let's work our way through it, and eventually we can get you to center and figure that out and start talking about your new experience that's lying ahead of you.
Right. Absolutely. So it was definitely unique. I think I was really, really fortunate in the situation I was in because I realized that not every grad assistant gets that. But, so our season ended and, the season's winding down. Take a day or two to reflect and kind of just stay out of the gym and clear your head. And then after that period was over and, we started to get back in and plan out the postseason workouts and everything. Coach Moore and I had a meeting and he was just, I got really, really lucky. He told me that he was going to try to create a full-time position for me. We had been in the middle of an AD hire, so it was athletic director hire, so it's a little complicated. But I was all in, and I still am. I'm probably UWG's biggest fan. It's not there, but so when I played in college, my associate head coach, who I know has been on the show, Travis Schwab over at Muskingum, when he took the job at Muskingum my sophomore year, I'll never forget, for the next 3 weeks before he moved, he was there. He was there at the 6:30 a.m. lifts. He was there, at the team meetings, the team dinners. And that really meant a lot to me. So I told Coach Moore and I told our players, no matter what happens, I am working here all the way through. And I got some good advice from one of my mentors who said, don't ever leave a job until you have a job. So in the postseason, I kind of, after the season ended, just kept working like I was still a GA and I was getting ready for next season. So that involved doing all the player development stuff, 8 hours a week, like we did in the preseason, recruiting a little bit. Obviously, spring is when it started opening up with COVID. And then we had camps. I had put on 4 camps over the summer for West Georgia. So doing all that, while at the same time kind of having this, we're fighting for you to have a job, but we don't have a decision maker and we don't have anything on paper. It was hard, so I kind of just, again, followed some advice I had gotten and just start with who you know. So I started reaching out to a lot of good coaching friends and just kind of mentioned it to them, said, hey, if you hear of anything, let me know. And, fortunately through that, I had I had a list at one point of 8 or 9 schools that had some level of possibility, of me getting a job there. And each one of them, I would kind of organize by how I got connected there, who I knew in that area, who were the good players in that area, and try to see what I could do. But it, so through that process, going for jobs, every head coach, I think, wants to do it differently. At least the 3 or 4 that I got close with did. But a big part is you got to build your relationship. That's really, such a huge part of coaching, obviously. And, when somebody, puts their name out there for you and, connects you with a head coach who's looking to hire somebody, it's your job to just create value any way you can, So every coach is different. Again, I had gotten advice from an associate head coach at a school that I was really interviewing hard at. And he said, our coach wants you to have people call for you. He said, it's okay if they don't have any connection to our school or him. He just wants, people to call for you. You can vouch for your character. So I was really lucky. I had a few people do that for me, and ended up not getting that job. But for that one and for another one, like the graphics are a big part of what I did at West Georgia. So I went online and created some graphics, created some possible content for Twitter, player highlights, team highlights, whatever it may be. Just trying to send it to the coach and let him know, hey, this is what I can bring to the table. And then I had been in the process of doing some scouting reports for these schools, just actually scouting their team, watching games last season. But when I was in the middle of one of them, I had gotten the call that they were going in another direction. But it's just trying to find ways to bring value, I think, was the best approach. And fortunately with center, the way that kind of happened was I had seen they had an opening, and Coach Greg Mason, my head coach, he actually recruited me like 8 years ago coming out of high school. So I had his contact information, and it was a really good recruitment. I really wanted to come to center in high school, but didn't have the grades. And, but fortunately we had gotten along, and he remembered me, and there was an interview process and search committee and all that stuff. But by the grace of God, I ended up here, and it worked out. But it was, June and July, especially after camps ended in June. It was a stressful time, and I think a lot of coaches go through, but it, really helps you to remember why you're in the business, and it makes you a lot more grateful for the opportunities you do have.
Absolutely. All right. I want to touch on 2 things that you mentioned. The first is the value add that you tried to bring as you were going into your job search by creating, as you said, the graphics, social media, the things that you had done previously that are a skill set that, let's face it, not every coaching candidate was going to have those particular skills. So the fact that you were trying to highlight those as something that you could bring to the program, I think there's a great lesson there for young coaches who are looking for jobs. Try to find something. It could be social media, it could be graphic design, whatever, that sets you apart, that makes you unique, something that you can bring to the table that's going to add value to whatever program is looking to hire you. Same thing with the scouting reports. Here you are preparing and getting ready for an interview, looking at the schools where you're considering trying to apply or where they're considering interviewing you, and just taking a deep dive into their teams and creating these scouting reports to, again, be able to show what you would be able to do or what you would be able to bring to the staff. To me, that's incredibly valuable, and it's a great lesson for any young coach out there. And then the second piece of it is the fact that you had to show patience in order to be able to eventually get your job at center. And as you said, I'm sure those 2 months where you're sitting at home and you're trying to figure out, where am I going to be next year? Where am I going to be coaching? Where am I going to live? And what am I going to be doing? I'm sure it was an incredibly stressful time, maybe not even in a bad way, but just the uncertainty of knowing. And then finally you get it straightened out and you get an opportunity to go to center. What do you remember about the interview process at center? Is there anything that you can point to, that maybe a piece of advice that you might have for other coaches who might be heading into an interview, something that you felt like you did well, or a question that you felt like you were especially prepared for, whether because you had prepped on your own or somebody who maybe you had reached out to, a mentor said, hey, be prepared to answer this type of question? Anything from the interview that you can pull out that might help a young coach out there who's coming up on an interview?
Definitely. I think you said it, a couple things. Like the first thing I thought was just having questions, and having questions prepared. I did some I got very lucky again in April and May, doing some video interviews, and I wasn't as prepared as I should have been, and it probably showed. In a few of them. So by the time end of June rolled around, and I was interviewing with center, I was much more prepared. Had a lot of questions, written out, and not just questions that they always hear. Not just questions about what type of stuff do you run, and what do you like about center. I asked some hard ones. I said what's the hardest part about being at center? Which in an interview, you think, oh, you're not supposed to bring up anything negative. But it was honest, and it gave the panel the opportunity to be honest with me about, what I was getting into potentially. And I think it just helped us become more comfortable with each other. So that was one. And then the other thing that you also mentioned was, like I said, I was recruited by Coach Mason back in high school. And as you know, the basketball world is pretty small. So being in Kentucky, being a school that I've been a little familiar with, I did have some mutual coaching friends who, were able to call and, just get a feel for what Coach Mason was looking for, and they said, look, you got to be yourself in the interview. Like that's the bottom line. But here's some things that the last guy did well and didn't do well. Here's what they need. Here's what they struggle with. So yeah, trying to get that inside info, if you want to call it that, was helpful. But at the end of the day, I think you just have to be yourself and let your values and let your actions speak for you. Throughout the interview process, and like I said, I got really lucky. I got really lucky. I know everybody does, but it all worked out thankfully for me.
How are things going so far? What's been the best part of the job, other than having a job itself? What's been the best part of being at center thus far? Obviously, you're not too far into the school year, and at the Division III level, you haven't been able to get out on the floor with any of your players yet. But just what's the experience been like so far?
Yeah, it's been great. Definitely a lot of learning. Talking about recruiting at West Georgia. And I'm doing a ton of recruiting here at center, but it's not completely different, but they are very different. And the big reason for that is, obviously Division III, you don't have scholarships. And then center itself is a really, really good school. I mean, I think US News or one of the publications just came out and put us in the top 30 in the country. So it's academically really challenging here, and that limits the pool of players that you're able to recruit. But I've been fortunate to, I've got my college roommate coaches Division III. I've got a lot of friends who've bounced around different levels and have been here. So I've been able to lean on them a little bit and just ask them, hey, how do you approach this? Or, if you have a borderline kid, what do you do? Coach Mason obviously has been a huge, huge help with that. Coach Mason's been the head coach here for 21 years, won 11 out of the last 15 conference titles. So he knows what he's doing, and I'm here to follow along and learn from him. And then we're just lucky at center that the admissions team is really good and answers all your questions and is really helpful. So I guess my long-winded answer, my favorite part is just, getting involved and kind of learning the differences, because there are some, but, obviously the same things, getting to know our players, getting to see them in study hall. And, we do a lot of culture stuff here and, meeting with the freshmen individually, meeting with the seniors individually. Because like you said, in Division III, we can't be on the floor with our players right now. So everything is senior led. And, we've got a really good group, really talented, really mature guys. And, so getting to work with them and kind of learn the center culture has probably been the best so far.
What do you hear from them? I'm always curious about this when I talk to Division III coaches. And obviously, as you said, it has to be led by the players and coaching staff can't be there, what are your players doing right now? What are your seniors organizing for players? Does that mean are they organizing workouts? Are they organizing pickup? Are they organizing 3-on-3? Is it just tell me exactly what are they putting together?
Right. So pretty much just the open gyms and playing and then lifting twice a week with our strength coach. And, they've got to work to, we're Division III. We're really lucky. We've got a practice gym. So that helps with gym space. But, we've got men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, cheerleading. So they've got to coordinate the times and get with the other captains and just make sure there's no conflicts. And then obviously the weight room, we've got time with the strength coach, so those are kind of set, but it's their responsibility, to make sure that the pace of play is at the right level, that people are showing up, consistently and when they can be there. Like I said, center is a high academic school. And if you have to study, like you need to go study. Now would we prefer that get your studying done in study hall and on your, manage your time better so you can make it to basketball, of course. But so the seniors kind of play a big role in that. All that's important. And then as important possibly is the off the court stuff. It's really a big deal that the freshmen are comfortable, that the freshmen, feel at home. And that's really, I guess it's not unique to center. Any freshman that's going away for the first time is going to have those nerves and homesickness and everything. But especially at a rigorous academic school, seniors, we really encourage them to invite the freshmen to hang out, and hey, let's go watch the Monday Night Football game or whatever it is, and just make sure that everybody knows that there's resources there for them if they need it. So that's a big part of what the seniors do. And then again, when we get to the basketball stuff, we can ask them how is it? Is it competitive? Who's playing well? Is everybody showing up? But like I said, they've been doing great so far. We've got 4 seniors. All of them are different, but all of them bring really important things. And we got just about a month left from the day of recording. So hopefully they finish strong these last 30 days before real practice starts.
Absolutely, right? You want to come in as ready and as prepared as you possibly can. You mentioned that you've been on the road a lot recruiting, and we've obviously talked a couple times about the rigorous academics there at center. So when you think about that from a recruiting standpoint, I guess in my mind, I'm going through and trying to think about, would that make my recruiting process harder in that there's a much smaller pool of players who are going to fit the profile both from a basketball skill standpoint along with the academics, or does it in some small way make it easier because it narrows the pool of there's only so many guys that we can even consider recruiting because of the high academic standards? So I don't know which one, or if either one of those describes kind of the way that it's felt so far to you. Obviously, it's a new experience. You're just kind of getting into it. But where are you in terms of how the academics fit in to the recruiting process there at center?
Yeah, so I think it's like you said, it's definitely a smaller pool of players who fit the academic profile. It's still a big pool. There's still a lot of really good players out there. But I'd say the big difference is, coaches get in trouble a lot. People like to tease coaches about, when they say, well, who else is offered? I understand, like, for some coaches that's because, well, I don't know if he's good enough, and I need to tell my head coach that he's got other offers, and that'll give us leverage to offer him. But like for a Division III school and even at Division II, even low majors, it's important to hear who you're up against, because especially in Division III, like if a kid has the opportunity for a free education, I don't know. I have a hard time. I'm not going to tell them to ever turn that down. I'll tell them the great things about center, but if someone's going to take a free education, I mean, that's hard to pass up. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If I ask somebody who else do they offer, so I know that, okay, I probably don't need to spend too much time recruiting him because he's got, 5 full scholarship offers at other really good schools. So that's one difference that I think is a little more prevalent with the Division III. But some of it's the same, I guess. Like I said, you're just starting with a different pool of players that meet the academic standards. And then from there, a lot of it's the same. You have to evaluate on court, verify that the classroom's okay. Obviously, checking on guys' characters, becomes the most important piece at some point in the recruiting process. And then it's the same thing, at West Georgia, we were recruiting guys who had other offers and, taking visits to other schools in our conference. And that happens here too, so it is a little different without scholarships. For example, different states have state money that they can give. And, some schools will match that. Some schools won't. So Center in particular, you just can't accept money from different states. So that can limit the pool a little bit. But yeah, in general, it's just a different circle, I think, of potential players that you're looking at with recruiting.
If you're looking to improve your coaching, please consider joining the Hoopheads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoopheads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Follow us on social media at hoopheadspod on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out the Hoopheads Podcast Network for more great basketball content. For you, as a coach who's out on the road recruiting, and now you've recruited at 3 different levels and been involved in that process, how do you have to adjust the way you're looking at the player's talent, skill level, physical attributes, intangibles when it comes to, let's say, recruiting a Division II player versus recruiting a Division III player? In other words, is it, I don't know if hard is the right word, but what's the adjustment like in terms of, okay, 6 months ago I was out and I was at an AAU tournament and I'm trying to find players who are capable of playing really well at the Division II level. Now I'm looking for players who are playing at the division, who are really good, that can play at the Division III level. How do you approach that? Just what's the adjustment like in terms of yourself being able to figure out what the type of level is of player that I'm looking for that can play at the school that I'm representing at the given moment?
Mm-hmm. I think there's 2 parts. The first one we kind of just talked about in the last question is it's just like before you do anything, you need to get an idea of where the players are academically, because it's just a waste of time if you can't. I mean, like I said, we're high academic Division III, and they mean it. I mean, I had a good GPA in high school. I don't remember exactly. I was above a 3.0, but I wasn't able to get like any scholarship at Center. So the number one thing is you verify the academics a lot quicker in Division III. And then the second one, I think this is good for coaches at all levels. It's more about who can play for your head coach, than thinking of it as a macro D2, D3, I think, in my opinion. And you have to recruit players that fit your head coach, that fit your school. So, and obviously the team needs factor in, but like in Division II, you can take guys with a lot of skill, a lot of untapped potential, kind of knowing, I think that, if it just, again, it depends on your head coach, but like at West Georgia, we didn't have many freshmen that would come in and play a gigantic role right away. Whereas with Coach Mason at Center, we've got some freshmen that are going to play that we'll be depending on, and again, you could attribute that to D2 versus D3. But I could say pretty confidently that there's D2 conferences where where true freshmen can come in and impact, and there's D3 conferences where true freshmen can't come in and impact. So I think it's as much as it is the level, and obviously that, like you said, the size, strength, speed, and skill are all factors of the level. But I think more importantly for coaches recruiting, it's get guys who fit with your head coach, get guys who fit with your program. So that's kind of one thing that I've been trying to learn and trying to put into action these first couple months.
So as a new coach in those first couple months, how do you get to know your head coach and the type of players that he likes to coach and the type of players that are going to mesh well with his coaching style when, again, you haven't really even been able to be on the floor with your current players? What's that process like? Is that a conversation with him? Is that a conversation with assistant coaches? Is that a conversation with the players that even though you're not out on the floor working with them, you can have a conversation and try to get to know them and what makes them tick and what they like about the head coach? What's that process been like for you so far?
Two parts. It's conversation and film. Because like you said, we can't be on the floor, but it's funny with the conversation. The first time I asked Coach Mason, it was kind of in passing. I said, what are the players you like? What do you look for? And he thought about it and he goes, you know what? I really like big guys who can shoot. I said, well, yeah, I think everybody likes that.
Thanks for the tip, Coach.
Right. So that was good. But no, I mean, we had more in-depth conversations about it. Our point guards aren't always going to be our leading scorer. And in the past we've had success with 4-3 wing guards. Who can hit a set shot, who can really get to the basket, use their size and length. So we talked about the specifics a little bit, and then I asked him too. I said, what are some good games for me to watch from last year, just to get a feel for the offense. What we do, because that'll, obviously we'll dictate the offense to our players, but if you can watch good games the head coach likes, you can see the actions, the buckets, the types of plays and players that are scoring and executing. So, with COVID and everything, it was funny. He's like, don't even watch last year. Last year was a disaster. Just go back 2 years ago. So I watched about 6 games that he had suggested and pointed out, and saw the guys that we were losing, that we didn't have back, saw a few returners, and got to see, what they did and kind of what the missing pieces around them were. So kind of both, kind of just film and conversation. And, that's one thing too. I was fortunate to learn at a young age is like, I'm sure Coach Andy Young, if he ever hears this, he'll laugh, but I ask a lot of questions because I think that's the only way to learn. Obviously the best way to learn something is to just do it. But I'm not afraid to ask questions because, you got to get the information one way or the other. You got to know what you're doing, to make sure you're not going down the wrong path. Like with recruiting, you don't want to spend time on someone that your head coach would never sign. So I probably ask a little too many questions sometimes. But like I said, it's always to get what's best for the program and get the information that'll help.
What was the most important question that you needed answered before you took the job at center? So when you were in that interview process or you were going through your preparation, what was the most important question that you wanted to have answered in your own mind before you felt comfortable taking the job?
Wow, that's a good one. The most important question, I don't know. I mean, I don't consider myself to be in a position where I can really be picky. I knew this position was a lot of recruiting. So one of the questions I did ask was, I said, am I going to miss practice to recruit? Because obviously practice is a sacred time. And obviously good practices lead to wins and bad ones won't. So I asked that question about how much practice would I be expected to miss, and we talked about it, and I'll be recruiting on the road some, and are some practices that I'll have to leave early. But Coach Mason said too, he said, if our number one guy is playing, I need to be there. He says, then some days you'll stay back and run practice and I'll go recruit. So it was a really good answer. But like I said, I really wasn't picky. I understand how hard these jobs are to get and how lucky I am to have one, especially a great one at a school like Center. So I wasn't when I did ask those questions, I'd always preface it with like, this is not a make or break type of thing.
Understood. And I think that you want to be able to get the information that you're looking for. And yet, to your point, especially when we think about where you were and trying to find a job and getting an interview, that you want to make sure that you find the right fit. You want to make sure that you get the answers to your questions. And yet you also don't want to make it seem like you have to have a perfect scenario where you're putting off the people who are interviewing you. I think that's what you're trying to get at. And that's good advice for any coach out there who's trying to get a job and is going through the interview process, is to make sure that, yes, you do your research and you try to find out and make sure that the school is going to be a good fit for you, but also that you don't make it seem that you're so picky that, hey, we don't want this guy around because he's just going to want everything to be perfect. And we all know that in the college basketball world, in the coaching world, nothing is ever perfect. And there's a lot of things that you have to do to make the situation a good one by putting in the time and demonstrating your work ethic and being willing to go above and beyond. When you start thinking, Mark, about where you are right now and you look ahead over the next year, I want to wrap up with this two-part question. First part is, what do you see as being the biggest challenge for you in the year ahead? And then number two, when you think about what you get to do every day, when you wake up right now on September 16th, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, what's something that brings you the most joy about what you're getting to do as an assistant coach at Center College? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, I almost struggle to say it because it's hard to have real challenges because it's all basketball, but I don't know if you mean from me or from a team standpoint. I guess you could answer it from both perspectives, because I think both of them would be interesting to hear. So what do you think is going to challenge you personally, professionally? And then when you think about your team and what you know about them to this point, what's going to be their biggest challenge or your biggest challenge as a collective staff, a collective program? Yeah, maybe my biggest challenge will be kind of what we talked about is balancing the recruiting and then the time spent on campus with our team. In Division III recruiting I probably should have touched on it earlier, but you do have a larger pool of players, because you're not offering scholarships, but most of the time players are paying to come to school and play. So further recruiting, there's a lot more kids, I think, a lot more players that you're actively involved with. Whereas at the Division II level, when you have a scholarship offer, you can be a little more selective on who you're going to recruit. But with basketball play, or with Division III, you're selective, with the academic profile. But again, it's the opposite of paying for someone's education. They still have to pay for it. So I think balancing the recruiting and still, being there for our team on campus will be a challenge. But I say that, with the thought in mind that like I'm very lucky that I had a lot of responsibility at West Georgia, and I'm going to give it my best and hopeful that I'll find the right balance of it. For the team wise, our biggest challenge is it's really going to be just finding. This is kind of alarming to say, but finding our go-to guy. We've got 3 starters back, but last season was just, for a lot of Division IIIs, last season was not a real season. We played at Center, played 8 games, and had 7 practices before the first game. So our current sophomores never really got taught, how we want to play defense. Never really got taught, the full playbook that we run offensively. So that'll be the challenge. We've got an older team, but because of the season last year, it's almost like everybody's a grade younger, if that makes sense. So I think we'll have some adjustment with that and some obstacles to overcome and some challenges. And then the biggest joy, I mean, it's just it's the people. It's the people is getting to see our players and getting to see the other coaches and, be around a young, vibrant campus, with a lot of bright people, a lot of really smart people here. It's just a joy, to be there every day. And, so I got to pinch myself sometimes, like, coaches are sitting in the office watching highlight tapes. And we have a joke, like every highlight tape I've seen, everybody shoots 100%. So it's like you're watching good basketball clips all day long, and talking to people and telling them about how great center is. Like it's just a joy, absolutely, every day to get up and get to work and get to share this great place that I'm at, with young people, with parents, with other coaches, so it's a blast. And one of my basketball mentors told me, like before I got in the business, he said, he's like, Mark, it's really stressful coaching. You're trying to worry about how we're going to defend this, and how's so-and-so struggling in this class, and how are we going to pass? But like the basketball stuff, he said, it's not real stress. He's like, you shouldn't be. I get it. Coaches always talk about their hair going gray and losing sleep, losing hair over stuff. But at the end of the day, basketball is a kid's game. Basketball is a game that's, that young, brings young people in America together, and all over the world brings people together. So while it is stressful and while there are challenges and things that make you scratch your head, at the end of the day, it's a game, and to be able to say that, you can work and support yourself through a game like basketball, and, get to work with young men and young people at a university. It's just the whole thing is a joy, really.
Well said, Mark. And just again, I want to say personally, congratulations to you on the new job at center. I know we talked over the summer. You were working hard to be able to try to find that next opportunity, to find the right place for yourself. And it sounds like you've been able to do that. And I wish you the best of luck heading into the season. We're glad that we were able to have you on for a second time, have you back on the show to talk about your experiences. And again, I think you shared a lot of things with us and with our audience tonight that any young coach who's out there listening can benefit from the experiences that you've been able to share with us. So thank you. Appreciate it. If you would, before we go, can you share how people can reach out, get in touch with you, learn more about the program at Center, and then I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Like I said, I've been a fan of the show for a long time, and to be on here twice is really an honor, and it's been fun. But probably the best way to get in touch with me would be Twitter, just at Coach Mark Schult. No underscores, no spaces, no numbers. I'll always respond if you DM me. My DMs are open, and if you want a further discussion or something, you could go on our website, centerkernels.com. My contact info is on there, and I think if you listen to the last podcast, I was a little young and felt like I was a baby back then, but I think I put my phone number on the last podcast. So if for some reason I don't get back to you after 2 days, which would be a rare occasion, you can get my phone number on there, and we can do that. But thank you again for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. Really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.